Hi, Mom. So I got my ticket home from Europe. I get back on June 6th, but it's a really late flight because that was the cheapest, so it gets in at midnight. But don't worry, I'll get a shuttle from the airport so you don't have to pick me up. Like, really seriously, you don't have to. Okay, so love you. See you soon. Bye.
So Christmas Duck. Christmas Duck is a fan favorite. He's kind of a mascot, I guess, and I think that's partly because it's a weird concept, a Christmas duck, and partly because it's like the first unique thing that you encounter in the game. It's kind of personified. He's like a little character. But the thing is, Christmas Duck was not planned. When we were starting the project, we didn't have a 3D modeler because Kate came on a couple months after we started, and we needed a bunch of 3D models. And so I was just going through the Unity asset store. So I was going through the list and saw this Christmas duck, and I was like, "What is that?" Okay, and I grabbed it and we used it as like a test object just to set up the system where you can grab stuff and carry it around. And then I ended up saying, "All right, we got this Christmas duck, I'll hide the key under it." And instead of replacing the free model with a totally different thing, just made a real version of it. And Carla modeled it, and Kate textured it, and we kept him in the game. And we're glad because he's everybody's little friend. Good old Christmas duck. Hi, I'm Steve Gaynor. I'm the co-founder of the Fulbright company. We made Gone Home. I was the writer and designer, and thank you for taking a look at our commentary mode. Whenever you find an icon like the one you just clicked on, you can find out a little bit more about the game. I want to thank everybody who's added commentary. Janman and Carla, my co-founders of the company, Kate Craig, our 3D artist, Chris Remo, our composer, Sarah Grayson, the voice of Sam Greenbrier, and Corin Tucker, the lead singer of Heavens to Betsy and Slater Kinney and other awesome bands. So thank you, everybody, and enjoy commentary mode.
Hello, my name is Kate Craig, and I was creating a lot of the environment assets for the game. Not all of them, some of them I had help with, which I'll touch on a little later, but most of the stuff like the walls and the floors, some of the larger pieces of furniture were my doing, and I'm going to be talking about some of the environmental storytelling aspects in Gone Home. I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't mention the work that my wife Emily Carroll did on the project. She did the house title image that we've used for our wallpapers and for the start screen of the game. She did the loading cassette tape, and she did the maps in the house. And actually, Carla made a font out of her handwriting because we wanted something that was just a little bit spooky, maybe a little ominous, but something that sort of suited the tone of the game. And I was really glad to be working with her, and I was really glad that the other guys were too. We had a really good time. And people have responded quite positively to her title screen, which is something that I really appreciate, and I know she does too.
Oh man, mom handwriting. we went through a lot of different moms for handwriting. A lot of different moms contributed handwriting for our game. At first, let's see, how did we do? What were we doing at first? I think I just did it, and it wasn't great. And then we had Emily do it, but her handwriting was used so heavily in other parts of the game that we had to find someone else. And I think we actually had Yanaman try to do it for a while before he was Dad's handwriting. And then we got Yanaman's mom, and she was ideal for it. Really good mom handwriting. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Chris Remo, the composer on Gone Home. In my commentary tracks, I'm going to be talking a little bit about what went into creating the original music soundtrack for the game. Gone Home is an unusual game, musically speaking, in that it consists of two distinct music soundtracks. The one of those probably more frequently commented on is the collection of licensed Riot Grrrl songs that the player finds in Sam's cassette tapes strewn around the house. The other one is the original music that accompanies the player's undirected exploration of the house and underscores almost every one of Sam's audio diary recordings. When Steve first asked me to do music for Gone Home, I was really excited about it, but there are almost no parameters for what that meant in terms of format or scope. Having played an early build of the game, I started by just doing a few musical sketches with no real regard for length or usage, mainly consisting of vintage electric piano sounds like Wurlitzers and Fender Rhodes. I chose those instruments because I wanted sounds that would feel at home in the era of the game. The Twin Peaks soundtrack used a lot of Rhodes, for example, but would also blend into the background and not share much tone in common with the abrasive Riot Grrrl guitars. Some of the instrumentation and ideas changed from those first sketches, but they also contained one of the main themes that ended up accompanying Sam's arc throughout the final game.
Hi, this is Corin Tucker from Heavens to Betsy. And Heavens to Betsy was a band that formed in 1991, actually. And I actually got the idea for joining a band when I moved to Olympia, Washington, and became a fan of the music scene there. And it seemed like everyone was in a band. So I decided I was going to start a band too. But I didn't actually start the band until I went home after the first year of college and went back to Eugene, Oregon, and my high school friend Tracy Sawyer and I started playing music together, and that was the beginning of Heavens to Betsy. So I had told, with my big mouth, I had told all my friends that I was going to start a band, and the summer of, I think it was 1991, my friend Michelle Noel booked the International Pop Underground in Olympia, Washington. And she helped organize a night at the convention called Girl Night. And it was all women musicians. So she called me and said, hey, let's get you on stage with that, you want to play the show that I'm organizing. This totally new band that had never performed before. I mean, we had never performed ever any kind of music. Got invited to play this big show at the Capitol Theater in Olympia in front of all of our musical heroes, right? Everyone from K Records, all of Fugazi was there, all of Bikini Kill was there. This music that I was a huge fan of suddenly. That was our very first show, the very first Heavens to Betsy show. And we were terrified, but we did it, and people loved it, and it was, it changed my life forever that night.
So here's one of Dad's pulpy JFK books. He's now moved on from primary sources to theories about how JFK was killed. However, this one purports to contain the truth. The publishing company is a doofy inside joke because, there's Harcourt Brace, the publisher that exists, and so I was trying to think of a good name for a publisher, and being a big nerd, I immediately thought of Harcourt Fenton Mudd, and how he basically sounds like a publishing company. So.
You have to say who that is.
No. All right, fine. He's an awful character from
Star Trek.
Original Star Trek, which is called Mud's Women, and also there's another one whose name an episode I can't remember for some reason.
I'm Mud.
Fuck. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
It's a Star Trek reference. You did
Yes.
it, Carla.
What?
The doors were actually one of the hardest things in the game to get working correctly, and I know that there's still some bugs existing with the doors, actually. But it's a surprisingly hard problem, which is why most video games just have doors that kind of slide away into nothingness or open in strange ways or don't, let you interact fully with doors. But of course, it's in a house like in Gone Home, a realistic house. It's important that everything be as natural as possible. The one concession we made to video gaminess is that the doors all swing both ways, which never happens in a real house, but it's necessary to prevent the player trapping themselves in some strange state.
Here we have Fresh Magazine, which is a synthesis and pastiche of Sassy Magazine, which if you haven't looked at it or if it wasn't, something that you cared about in the early 90s, it was very feminist and, strongly individualist and actually gave good advice. It was actually really good. Anyway, so yeah, this is the type treatment, the super grungy type treatment is totally indicative. That's how it used to be. Oh yeah, and amusingly, of course, our cover model is Rachel, Steve's wife. I had to make her put on this awful light pink lipstick and do the 90s-ist stuff imaginable. And she did it.
It was your idea to put a braid in the front of her bangs?
Yes.
Yeah, it seems like... Congratulations.
Oh, thanks.
Inside of this file folder, you find the first combination code in the game. This code goes to Dad's locked filing cabinet, and it's 0451, which is a bit of a tradition / in-joke amongst... I mean, it's not really an in-joke. It's just an internal reference amongst this lineage of games that hark back to immersive sims that are kind of first-person exploration games that started with Ultima Underworld and System Shock, and 451 was the first key code in System Shock, and then it was also the first key code in System Shock 2 and Deus Ex and BioShock and most recently Dishonored. And yeah, I've personally worked on a couple of games that had 0451 as the first code in them, and we were really adherent to the tenets of the interactive model and kind of the principles of design behind those games when we were designing how Gone Home works. And so to maintain that tradition, we also made it the first code in our game.
And you made it the tattoo on your arm.
I also got a tattoo of 0451 because it is sort of a symbol of this certain philosophy of game design that's important to me. And yeah, this writing, breaking canon, is in Emily's handwriting. Emily's handwriting is technically only in the font that exists outside the game. She doesn't actually do the handwriting in any of the characters, but yeah, I had her write 0451 in her very distinctive handwriting, and then I got a tattoo of it and figured I would use that source image as the image that you find on the inside of this folder here. when you're when you're putting like lamps and stuff around a house, one thing that you have to deal with is plugging them in. And something that always annoys me about level design in games is when there's some lamp or piece of electronics that would have to be plugged in because it doesn't run on batteries, but it doesn't have a cable because video games. And so, since a big part of the point of Gone Home is the specificity of the house and the believability of all the details,
Because of that, Steve himself.
I spent some late nights with my meager Maya skills modeling custom cables for each of the things that's plugged in so that the cables actually run from the TV or the lamp or whatever to an outlet in the wall.
It is a really good detail. I think that I'm proud of you for getting that in there, Steve. That's important. Yeah. So these are all the VHS tapes, or most of them, in the house. And these in the TV room are from they only belong to Dad and Sam, because Mom has some VHS tapes, but they're up in the bedroom. And you can tell Dad's because he writes in a big, heavy, all caps style handwriting, and Sam does not. So contrary to popular opinion, the X-Files tapes are not Dad's, they're in fact Sam's.
But stuff like JFK
Yes.
has an obvious dad interest, and some of the other stuff that we put in there was very much like, what is a dad movie?
Yeah.
You know, what is when we were growing up, for instance, like, what is a movie that our dad or a neighbor's dad would have? So stuff like The Andromeda Strain or Moonraker, it's just sort of like, yeah, dads
love that shit.
Yeah, dads that were born in the 50s were super into that kind of stuff. And then some of it was, stuff that we liked or remembered from when we were growing up. Like, you will know that Carla was involved in making this game because Beetlejuice and RoboCop are on a VHS tape. That's most of what you need to know about Carla.
That's true.
Right there.
My name is Sarah Grayson, and I do the voice of Sam Greenbrier in Gone Home. Currently based out of Portland, Oregon, so right around where the Fulbright Company is from, which is part of, I guess, how this all came to be. I started doing voiceover work probably about 4 or 5 years ago. It's been a bit of an on and off journey, because I also have had regular 9-to-5 jobs that whole time. So I always get excited when I see video game auditions come across, because it's always been something that I wanted to do, and really excites me because I'm a video game fan myself. So there was an audition that came across that at the time was entitled Dear Diary, and it had this wonderful description about being this sort of 16, 17-year-old girl. Not too much detail about her, just that she was, new to her school, new to this place she was living, and her sister had moved away. So she was sort of writing out her thoughts as if she was talking to her sister. So most of the time, I'll stand up at the mic when doing auditions. But for this one, I thought, well, no one's actually going to read their diary standing up. Like, this is kind of you write your diary while lying down in your bed, or like sitting cross-legged on the floor, or whatever. So I ended up having to pull the mic down, sat on my couch, legs crossed, got nice and cozied up in like my pajamas, and started reading it.
most of the bookshelves in the house are filled with undifferentiated books. I mean, they're not undifferentiated, but they're low detail because, God, it would be an entire dev cycle's worth of work to actually do plausible spines on every single book. That would kill us. And then to repeat a whole bunch of books would also be sort of terrible and not be very plausible. So we had chiefly unlabeled books or books in which the labels have been rubbed off due to age, etc. And we had a few individual books that were more precisely and specifically named.
The way that we did the books in the game is we made like 3 or 4 of these clumps of books that have, the generic spines on them. They're just sort of filler books. They're kind of like what would be in the bookshelves of like a lawyer's office in a in a cheap lawyer's TV commercial or something.
Right, where they buy them by the foot and whatever.
Yeah, and then we took 1 or 2 clumps and retextured them to all have specific readable spines on them, and then I just took those clumps and broke them up and scattered the individual books around in different bookshelves in the house, so that hopefully I think every bookshelf has at least one unique book in it. That might not be true of everything in the library since there's so many bookshelves there, but I guess I should say every or almost every bookcase had at least one unique book in it that never repeated, to kind of split the difference of, okay, they're not all generic, but also we can't afford to make them all unique, and we didn't want to have any repeat in an obvious way. So that was our strategy for trying to not do any of the things that we wanted to not do. Sam's story slash school assignment called The Menstrual Cycle, a Novella, is kind of a fan favorite. We've found like a lot of people have enjoyed it a lot, and it's one of those weird things where it wasn't planned. Like it was, let's see, I had decided that I wanted Sam to have done like some homework, and I thought sex ed homework would be interesting because sex ed is a weird class in high school to be in, and so I Google searched for an actual sex ed assignment, and the assignment is a real sex ed assignment that is given out in like the Pacific Northwest, like Seattle. I think this is technically from the Seattle School District website that I got this from. So I found this thing which I didn't come up with, that I was kind of presented with, and I think I had been reading some stuff about like cool female spies in World War II, or like saboteurs, that had been part of like the French Resistance and stuff like that, and so that's why the history book is next to the sex ed assignment. The intended implication being Sam was doing history homework and sex ed homework, and the history unit was on World War II, and so kind of as a fuck you to all of the annoying assumptions implied by the sex ed assignment, she wrote this story about a woman in the war who was more interesting than her menstrual cycle, like that is a person, but while fulfilling the requirements of the thing. And yeah, it ended up being this really kind of strange juxtaposition of concepts that ended up saying a lot about Sam, I think.
This is our old-timey record that we got from archive.org, source of all good things. It's by Adrian Rollini when he was with apparently the Taproom Gang. The song is entitled Got a Need for You, in case you can't read it, but you should be able to read it. And the duck I found on the internet. Adrian Rollini I got into him when I was on Bioshock 2 and helping source the soundtrack for that. And I did a lot of listening to 40s big band stuff, and Adrian Bellini was one of the ones that I really liked, and so it was cool to be able to revisit that.
I feel like one of the best bits of advice was actually from the Fulbright team before going in to do the first recording. And it was a suggestion that I should watch some episodes of My So-Called Life, which was great because I'd watched them all when they were actually on. It was one of those favorite shows my sister and I would sit down and watch every week. And so going back and watching them was definitely not a hard chore to have to do. So I basically went through all of the episodes I could find online in a couple of days. So it was a bit of a sudden binge watch of My So-Called Life, but it was great because I think watching My So-Called Life was a nice reminder of what a more natural presentation of a teenager is. So it was really, I don't know that it would have gone as well had I not done that.
The Goodfellow High School jacket and the logo generally is a reference to the logo for Minerva's Den, the section of Rapture that that DLC takes place in, that we worked on together. But we didn't want to make it look exactly like the owl logo from that game. We wanted it to be, an homage or a reference or whatever.
Yeah, so we decided that since this is a Pacific Northwest school and town and setting, that we would go for some native style representation. And let's see.
Well, actually, we were struggling with it for a little while because we wanted. At first, I was saying, just make it look like a very 90s looking school mascot logo illustration that's just cheap, that maybe one of the students did or something, and the direction wasn't good enough, and we didn't really have a good enough example to work from. And then Kate actually came to visit.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And she suggested, what if it's like a Pacific Northwest Native American style approach, and that really just clicked and made total sense.
We never really discussed the idea of individually scoring each audio log ahead of time. I just got an email one day from Steve after they had done the first round of voice recording with Sarah Grayson, who did an amazing job as Sam, and he said he'd been thinking about the idea of giving each log a piece of music to ground it in the proper tone. So I just started doing these short 20 to 60 second pieces, and that ended up being the bulk of the work for the game. It was a very iterative process. I did them in the order they were recorded, and I would just keep sending revisions of each log to Steve, taking his feedback, modifying the piece, and sending it back. Especially at the beginning, the feedback was almost always pull it back more. I've never done music this subdued before. Even more so than most game music, it primarily exists to quietly suggest a mood and tone to the player. Sarah's voice is always the main audio content. The game soundtrack I worked on previous to this was Blendo Games' 30 Flights of Loving, which consists of some really huge, bombastic, brassy pieces. So switching gears to Gone Home and constantly hearing pull it back, less melody, was surprisingly challenging at first. But over time, I think Steve and I developed a pretty good rapport. For the most part, the diaries required fewer revisions each time. And it's always a good reminder in a collaborative endeavor that your contribution only exists to make the whole work better, not to be seen or heard unto itself.
Around here, you will find some of Sam's Super Nintendo cartridges that she left behind. Obviously, for legal reasons, we couldn't put real games in, and so we conscripted a few of our friends in the industry who are really talented artists to make cool label art for fake Nintendo games that we came up with.
It's so true. The first one was Super Spitfire, and that was by Rachel Morris, who is a cool artist. What is it? The NYU?
The NYU Game Center. She's done a bunch
yeah.
of like posters and other art for them.
And then the next one was Adventures the Cat Returns, which is it's sort of a
It's a mascot platformer. Yeah. It's a Bubsy-esque toad having cat.
Oh yeah, but it's a regular cat. It's not a ball cat.
Yeah, it's a regular cat that rides a motorcycle towards an explosion.
Yeah.
But yeah, Lee Petty is the art director at Double Fine and worked on Brutal Legend, and I think he led up Stacking, and
Which is awesome.
He was nice enough to spend some of his free time making the label for Adventures The Cat Returns.
Yeah, we ran into him at GDC, and he offered to help us out, and we were all like, cool.
We were like, oh, you didn't think we'd take you up on that offer, did you? Draw us a cat.
Yeah, he regretted the error of his ways. And then the third one is Journey of Crystal, which is sort of a JRPG beast, and that was done by Gen Z.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's the art director at Supergiant, and she did pretty all of the art in Bastion.
Okay.
And is working on Transistor. I know we had some people say that they could tell that it was her art because it has such a signature look.
It's pretty distinctive
to how she does things. So it was really cool and really exciting to have these really talented people from other studios that are inspirations to us contribute their unique art to the game. So these are stereoscopic? Yeah, these are stereograms.
Yeah,
that's the
stereogrammatic.
Yeah, stereograms, popularized by the Magic Eye brand of images from the 80s and 90s. These really work. Like if you cross your eyes and you can do a Magic Eye image, you can see what's in these. Spoilers, they are.
Well, as I recall, there's a cool shark.
And
I don't remember what the other one is.
Carla.
What?
It's a big heart.
Okay, it's hard for me to do those things.
And that's true for a lot of people. So the two instances of people not being able to see those images are they just can't do them, which a lot of people just can't do them, or they were born in the late 90s or after the 90s and played our game and didn't know what the hell these things were.
Yeah, they're like, what is this weird static shit? Yeah,
well, I thought it was like we got some messages that were like, I thought it was just a weird drawing.
So good.
So, yes, as you get older, you can't hear really high-pitched sounds anymore, and you know what Magic Eyes are still.
It's the circle of life.
I was one of the hosts of the Idle Thumbs video game podcast for a year or two, and I go on there, and every once in a while, those guys are my friends. And I didn't want to put Idle Thumbs references all over the game, but I did want to have Idle Thumbs references in the game, so we localized them entirely to this one piece of paper. So almost everything on here is an Idle Thumbs reference, and specifically to a weird exchange that we had about Will Wright's GDC talk in like 2008, where he didn't want everybody to show up and crowd the place, so he gave his speaker name as Phaedrus, and then did a talk about a bunch of crazy stuff, including the idea of rocket mail, which was going to be like done by it was pitched by the U.S. Postal Service in the 50s and stuff. So, and then the thing on the podcast was about how Phaedrus had a little brother, and so anyway, whatever. The brother, of course, it's a Phaedrus, and you can't hardly see the icon in the back because it's obscured, but there's this 50s rocket icon in the back that's like the logo of Phaedrus Motors. And then also it's the reference that Will Wright was making, and that is a secondary reference here because it's a motorcycle thing, is that in Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, the book, the author is having kind of an ongoing exchange with this character of from Greek history called Phaedrus and motorcycles and blah blah blah. So it's a big knot of obnoxious references to lots of different stupid things. Barf Burger is enjoyed by all. So the thing is, I drew the Barf Burger because I drew all of Lonnie's drawings. So I drew the two cats on the motorcycle and the Captain Allegra drawings and stuff like that. And that was really I think that it goes hand in hand with I did Lonnie's handwriting in the game, and Carla did Sam's handwriting, and that was partly because the two of us were going to be working the most closely on this stuff, and so being able to just quickly like rewrite a note that we wanted to change and scan it and update the game and not have to like email somebody to say, oh, could you write that again or whatever, was really useful. And also we both just happen to have sloppy teenager handwriting that looks believably 17 years old. Also, I have a believably 17-year-old level of drawing skill, so that worked too. But it was fun because basically the notes were created in real life in essentially the same way they were in the fiction, where I would write my part of the note and then hand the piece of paper to Carla, and she would write her part of the note, and we just constructed it that way. A lot of Gone Home is about pointless interactivity that is sort of things being interactive for the sake of them being interactive, but it really comes from our inspirations of immersive sims like System Shock and Bioshock and Thief, where a big part of the design philosophy behind those games and Gone Home is that the world needs to be really internally consistent, and there's this feeling that if there's something that your character might do, you should be able to do it in the game. So in Bioshock, for instance, you can flush all the toilets and you can turn on all of the faucets, and that's also true in like Deus Ex and Dishonored. Like, and sometimes like the water fountains in Deus Ex give you like 1 health or whatever, but really you can interact with them because there's this expectation of, if you could interact with that, if you encountered it in this world, we should let you do that, right? So all of the faucets in our game can be turned on, and they can be turned on so that you can turn them on and you can flush all the toilets. And it extends into our philosophy behind, you can pick up every plastic cup and toothbrush and Kleenex box, not because it's going to add a whole lot to your understanding of this world to be able to look at the underside of a cup, but to pay off that expectation and say to the player, yeah, you could pick that up and look at it, so we're going to let you do that, and it's going to be consistent interactively with the stuff that is important, and that makes it your job to look at everything and give it your attention, and for you to decide and understand and figure out what has significance and what doesn't, and not for us to tell that to you.
Well, I mean, I've always, one of the most comforting things in the world to me is having somebody like brush my hair or stroke my head. Like my mom, when I wasn't feeling well, I could lie down in her lap and she would just brush my hair. And it would always make me feel better. Like the weirdest way, I couldn't figure out why, but it just seemed like this friendly connection to somebody that it is, like she says, it is strangely intimate.
Lonnie brought her hair dye over today. She said, I need to fix these roots. Think you could help?
Well, I mean, I've always, one of the most comforting things in the world to me is having somebody like brush my hair or stroke my head. Like my mom, when I wasn't feeling well, I could lie down in her lap and she would just brush my hair. And it would always make me feel better. Like the weirdest way, I couldn't figure out why, but it just seemed like this friendly connection to somebody that it is, like she says, it is strangely intimate in a way that I'd not really, I guess, put into words until reading that part of the script. Where that's what I was thinking of, was like that connection, that sort of human touch, that it's something so friendly and so loving that you can do. And that whole idea of like touching someone's scalp being so intimate, it just made me think of that. Just those wonderful little moments where just a touch can be so much more.
One of my favorite things that came out during development was someone wrote an email mistakenly referring to Mittens, and Steve replied in the voice of Katie, saying, "It's just Mitten. She's only one cat, Mom."
Another board game. This one wasn't done by me, though. This one was done by Carla. But I really like it because the ghost figures on the back of the game are actually long-deceased family members of mine. When I was home at Christmas, I was digging through my family's basement, sort of getting an idea of what a basement has in it, just sort of for set dressing purposes. And while I was down there, I found a big box that my family actually hadn't seen. We got a big box of things from my grandmother after she passed away. And inside this box was all these tintypes, love letters and sort of emigration papers and notes from as far back as the 1850s, when my family had emigrated from Scotland and Ireland. And I asked my family if it was possible that I include these in some sort of artistic project, and they said sure. They gave me their blessing, and I scanned them. And I didn't know if they were actually going to make it in the game, but then I saw that Carla had made this game, and really liked that they showed up as ghosts on the back of it. And it's sort of, I think, a nod for Idle Thumbs listeners who really feel quite passionately about ghosts, as it turns out. Surprise!
So there's a lot less density in the house than there would be in a real house. Like, if you look around your house, there's just junk piled everywhere, probably.
Maybe
like,
it's just our house.
I think it's most house.
Oh, you're right.
But, so, our strategy was you either fully invest in something and, put, like, a plausible representation of this aspect of a room in, or you just don't put it in at all. And the player will fill in the gaps between, like, oh, these are all the things that represent the kind of room I'm supposed to be in, and it doesn't jump out at me that there's no toilet plungers in the bathroom or whatever. But the biggest instance of this that I think actually totally worked, because no one has ever called it out,
I know.
is, surprise, think about it, there are no shoes in this house. Ta-da!
Where's your brain now?
and I don't think anybody's noticed it, and I think it's because if we had put one pair of shoes or two pairs of shoes, people would have said, where are all the rest of the shoes?
Right.
But really, to have a plausible house, Mom would have to have 10 pairs of shoes and her work boots, and Dad would need to have some tennis shoes and some work shoes, and so on and so forth. So we just said, there aren't going to be any shoes, and we hope nobody notices. almost none of the events, the little events in the game, are scripted as far as like triggering when you do something specific. So all of the thunder and lightning and the creaky noises in the house, they're all just randomized on timers. The only like scripted thing is in the secret passageway. When you look at the crucifix, there's scripting that detects that you did that, and then it causes the light to pop, which is my one indulgence of like messing with the player. But we've had a lot of people play the game and say, oh, the way you scripted it so that right when I walked into the TV room there was that big thunder and lightning strike, like that was really spooky, or I walked through that one door and then you played that sound behind me, and it's like it's awesome that the combination of all the different kind of like significant actions you can do in the game,
Right.
like crossing into a new room or opening a door or this, that, or the other thing, and the randomization of stuff can make it seem like the random elements have extra significance to them, but in fact it's like you just got lucky, basically.
Yeah, it's total apophenia, because it's just because there's enough random things going on, and you can do enough things that eventually some of them are going to line up,
Yeah.
which is cool.
I really enjoyed playing Gone Home. I have to say it was pretty exciting to find the Heavens to Betsy tape, because that was really, those songs really did come out on a cassette tape at the time, and that really was how people discovered the music, was getting a cassette tape passed around. So getting to put it in the actual tape player and play it and listen to our song, it definitely gave me chills. It was like, wow, how exciting for a young person today to get that moment of discovery, and to listen to our music. I think it's great. Yeah, I ended up being pretty happy with this. This is the only picture of Lonnie that we had for a really long time, and I was really glad to actually come up with something that we liked, since this kind of thing is really hard, especially when it is...
Lonnie came over today, but everything was different. She was sitting at my desk chair, and she wouldn't look at me. Finally, I asked her what was going on. She said she felt like she'd done something wrong that night in the city. Like I must think... But I said no. There was nothing wrong. I just wanted to say... But I couldn't find the words. I felt like I was gonna cry, but I wasn't sad. She got up and sat next to me on the bed. I looked at her. Lonnie... Do you think you could ever... And that's when she kissed me.
Yeah, I ended up being pretty happy with this. This is the only picture of Lonnie that we had for a really long time, and I was really glad to actually come up with something that we liked, since this kind of thing is really hard, especially when it is such a major character. The other thing is, Lonnie has a cross necklace. She also has some Catholicism in her family.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I don't think that particular detail has been called out by anybody. People notice like the Bibles and whatnot, but yeah, I intended for Lonnie, like I thought it would be interesting if she came from a more conservative family than Sam's, in that she actually wears a cross necklace and carries some, Catholicism with her, and her dad was an army guy, and her background is even in some ways maybe kind of more stifling than Sam's, and that's probably why she's a more like openly rebellious person on the outside. Yeah, the biggest purpose of the card was to say, oh, Sam is 17, if you look for this thing. But there's so much, we need so much handwriting in the game, especially for like one-off characters that you don't see their handwriting more than once. And we knew we needed a birthday card from some member of Sam's more extended family that you were never going to hear from again. And so I was like, okay, it could be her uncle. And as an Easter egg, kind of like wink and nod thing, like we're fans of, the Looking Glass legacy of games and Deus Ex and Dishonored, and so I got in contact with Harvey Smith, who is the lead designer of Deus Ex and the co-creative lead of Dishonored, and asked if he would just write on a piece of paper, "Happy Birthday, Sam," from Uncle Harvey, and he just took a picture with his cell phone and
like 5 minutes after you asked him. It was amazing. He was just like, "Yes, I will do this immediately."
Yeah,
it was the best.
I think he took a picture with his cell phone and it was really cool. Harvey's a great guy, and I love his games, and we're super honored to have his signature in the hub of the Greenbrier house.
Hell yeah.
One of the assets that I really liked creating in the game were these board games. So there's 3 in total of them throughout the house. Ideally, there'd be more, but we had to focus on the getting the walls built and things like that. But I really like them. They're just a simple extruded cube. There's something about environment design that's really fun. There's really goofy aspect of it where you have to create fake brand names. You have to create fake toys and fake storefronts. Maybe my favorite is in the game Costume Quest, when you're going through the shopping mall, there's a store called Why Not Flip Flops, which always makes me really happy. But this one is a parody of Dream Phone, which is a awful game that came out in the early 90s, where you sit around a table with your girlfriends and you pick up this plastic pink phone and call these sexy boys, and you see which one likes you. It doesn't really suit Sam's personality exactly, but I figure maybe it was given to her by a well-intentioned relative who doesn't quite have her personality down. And maybe she played it once on a lark and then put it in the closet, and that's where it stays.
Mom and Dad are much more actively religious. There's a Bible in the foyer, and there's a Bible in Dad's bedside table.
Or arguably they want to appear actively religious. But yes.
Yeah, I think that, my intent was that they aren't super religious, but they probably still go to church.
And they also they would feel bad if they put their Bibles away. They'd be like, oh, we need those to be out for us to look at, to consult in case we need them, or something.
But it's definitely, I don't know, it comes from my own experience of my parents went to church and were more religious and stuff, and as, I don't know, around when I was like 10 or 12 or something, I was just sort of like, I remember having a conscious realization of just, no, this makes any sense. like I was like, this is all about a guy who was dead and then came back from the dead. That doesn't happen. Magic isn't real.
Wow.
And then there was a process of like just being like, okay, well, I'm just not going to go to church. I also remember having a conscious realization that the only reason I wanted to go to church was because after the service they gave you free donuts.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine.
And so I don't know, it's probably just partially me projecting and trying to show that Sam is re-examining her own values as she gets older and grows out of childhood and doesn't necessarily share the same beliefs that her parents do.
I never tried really hard to, like, I don't know, actually, yeah, I don't know, it was normal church behavior. Like, I would go and, like, help out with, my younger siblings, and, like, my parents always went to church and whatever, and I'd go along, and there was, like, a couple of people that I knew there and everything, but it took me until I was about, I think I was, like, 13 or 14, and I spent a significant amount of time really trying to, like, to be like, all right, I'm gonna do this church thing, I'm gonna try really hard, and I would, like, get annoyed at people when they said, oh my god, and stuff, because I thought that was what we were supposed to do, and I think it was, I don't know, it lasted, like, whatever, 6 or 8 months or something, and then it broke, and I couldn't do it anymore, and I forget what I did something, I ruined something, in the church through total, not caring. I built I remember now, I built a house of cards out of a Bible trivia
like flashcard
set.
Yeah.
Well, it was just like Trivial Pursuit, except it was Bible based. And I built like this big house of cards, and at one point I remember thinking, all right, fuck it, and I glued the cards into place. So I had this big house of cards that was glued together, totally like ruining all the goddamn cards. And at that point, I stopped having to go to church so much.
At Todd's brother's place after the show, there was only a futon to sleep on, so Lonnie and I shared it. The lights went out. I was turned toward her. My eyes started to adjust, and then I could see she was looking at me, too. In the dark, she smiled. My heart was beating so fast. I rolled over. I felt so, I don't know, nervous? After a minute, she put her arm around me and was so close and whispered in my ear, I really like you. I just nodded my head, and I really hope she could tell. I really hope that she meant what I think she did. I felt like a shook-up can of soda ever since. I hope we have the chance to talk before I explode.
One of our favorite movies is The Apartment, which was directed by Billy Wilder, and it starred Shirley MacLaine and Jack Lemmon, and it's from like 1960, and it's basically what Mad Men is, except actually from that time.
Yeah.
It's super good, and there's this weird, like, kind of humorous vocal tick that some of the executives in the movie have, where they will refer to something like, they'll say like, we're doing quite well dividends wise or something, and Shirley MacLaine's character is named, her last name is Kubelik, and one of the executives at different times says something like, so how are you getting along Kubelik wise? So anyway, super deeply buried Easter egg reference in joke. We made the law firm Kubelik and Wise that prepared Oscar's will, just as a little wink and nod, a little Harcourt Fenton.
Quiet Steve.
But yeah, The Apartment, you should watch it
It's damn worth it. It's totally worth your time. It's a really good movie.
on Laserdisc.
Yeah.
This is where you find the first half of Sam's Locker, or I guess it's actually the second half of Sam's Locker combo as far as what the piece of paper is. But at first, there were the locker combination sheet was torn into 3 pieces. So you had 1 digit on each of them, and it was actually right before we sent out our IGF build to the judges. It was the night before, and Carla came down to the basement, and she was like, at 3 o'clock in the morning last night, I woke up in bed just being like, oh, we can't have it in 3 pieces, that's way too gamey. Well, that's bad, we have to fix that. And
I forgot about that.
And you were absolutely right. And you've had a couple of those being woken up by us making a bad decision kind of moments over the course of the development, and they were always important changes that needed to be made.
composing the ambient exploration tracks definitely ended up being the weirdest part of creating music for Gone Home. The audio diaries tended to take precedence since they had such clear criteria for completion, so the ambient tracks were the last things I did. I spent so long immersed in the logs, which were very specifically timed, that to suddenly shift gears to creating these slow, standalone 5-minute pieces was surprisingly difficult. I remember giving Steve a first stab at the ambient track for part 2 of the game, and I didn't hear anything back about it. When I eventually asked if he had any feedback, he said something like, "Oh yeah, it's great, I just slowed it down by 50% and it totally works," which cracked me up, because I definitely didn't have that in mind. But that's one of the great things about collaborative work, so I just went with it. I ended up doing a number of further revisions where I'd alter elements of the original version specifically to affect how the 50% slowed version would sound. It was definitely a new experience for me, writing bits of music and trying to imagine how they would sound after it's been considerably distorted. It got weirder though. The ambient track for part 1 ended up being a backwards version of the slowed down part 2 track. And again, there were elements that sounded good at 50% slow forwards, but not at 50% slow backwards. So again, I went back to the original track and started altering elements so they would sound better at half speed in reverse. I don't know if that's a thing ambient composers end up getting used to, but for me it definitely felt like going down the rabbit hole.
One of the larger assets that we needed for the basement to really give it character and personality was a furnace. And when we were initially thinking of the furnace, Steve had mentioned to me the furnace from Home Alone, which if you grew up in the 90s like I did, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So I did a lot of research and looked up stuff that could kind of evoke a similar feeling, and we finally settled upon octopus furnaces, which are like, they're thematically and time-wise very appropriate. They're these giant hulking monstrosities with all these arms covered in asbestos. Really perfect, so we ended up modeling one of those and put it in the corner, and I think it turned out okay.
I'm so stupid sometimes. I was telling Lonnie that I got into my college summer program thing, and I was all making plans like, you should come visit me, stay in my dorm room. But she said, Sam, I ship out on June 6th. I was like, ship out? To where? She said, to basic training. What did you think I was doing all that ROTC stuff for? I guess she's been planning to join the army right after high school since she was like 12. And I guess she's really going to do it. So I was like, after graduation, I'm just never going to see you again? She said, let's just have fun while we can.
Oh man, this thing.
So 2 things. 1, Mom's Canadian.
Yay!
2, Mom didn't start out Canadian. The reason that Mom is Canadian is because Kate Craig and Emily Carroll are Canadian, and early on in the development of the game, Emily did Mom's handwriting.
This is before she did any of the UI text or anything.
Right, and it was before we decided that all the moms were going to actually be written by moms and all that kind of stuff.
Integrity in moms.
And so we had the answering machine note in the foyer, and the line. What's the actual line that's there? It's like
Neighborhood.
Right. Yeah. So. The line on the thing is like, Daniel from the old neighborhood call him back, and we gave the text to Emily, and she wrote it out longhand and gave it back to us. And then I looked at it, and I realized that she had inserted a U into the word neighborhood
Because it's what you do.
because of
Canada.
being Canadian. And so to fix that bug, instead of removing the U, I said, "Bug fixed. Mom is now Canadian." So there's this little scrap of paper that's hidden under this bedside table, and you start to read it, and then Katie makes you stop reading it. So there's this little scrap of paper that's hidden under this bedside table, and you start to read it, and then Katie makes you stop reading it. And it was this thing where it's an exception to the interactive expectations that you have. Like, it's one place, I guess the one place where we really impinge on your ability as a player to do what you want. And Katie intervenes, basically, and it was something that I thought was an interesting little one-off way of emphasizing the difference between the player and the character that they're playing as. And to you as a player, the note's just a note, but a reminder that, like, Sam is Katie's sister, and Katie wouldn't want to read this thing, and she's not going to keep doing it, even if you want her to.
Todd's band lost their singer. Todd said he sucked. Lonnie said he got sick of Todd's shit, and he was complaining about needing a new singer. So Lonnie was like, I can sing. And they were all kind of like, you can? And she was like, probably. But she's been rehearsing with them for like a week now. And I finally got to see them play in Todd's basement today. And she's actually really amazing. I feel so proud when she's on stage. It's incredible being in awe of someone you love. So everybody knows it's like a temporary situation till she ships out in June. But till then, I'm gonna be at every single show.
You know, there was kind of this intellectual, cross-cultural, like, pen pal thing that happened before the internet. You know, we used to write letters back and forth to each other about our ideas and about how we wanted to change things. And so a bunch of these women that I mentioned came up with this idea of Riot Girl, of being a punk rocker that was also an in-your-face feminist.
They tell you to stick with the group on field trips, Katie. There's a reason for that. Lonnie and I snuck off on the side paths at Multnomah Falls and got a little lost. Okay, a lot lost. Like, for hours. Right before the bus left, we found a trail and came running down the path, soaked and covered in mud, shouting for the bus not to leave. The school called home. Mom and Dad said, "You didn't get into trouble like this before you met that Lonnie girl." But I don't think they know about us. The kids at school, though, I'm really afraid that's a whole other story. Stick with the group, Katie. Stick with the group.
There was a little bit of concern on my part before any of this got started that you never know how much liberty you're going to be given and how much over direction you're going to get, because somebody hears it like a specific way, and if you deviate from that at all, you're just going to keep doing the line over and over and over again, like 50 times until it's right. So I really wasn't sure what to expect, but even on the first day getting in there and being able to go through a few of the lines and just give them what came to mind, and seeing how closely I think everyone was on the page about it. So the direction was always really positive, and it was always kind of coming from either additional information that changed the context of what I was reading, or a certain change in the phrasing or the way something is being, a pause here, or maybe move it to here, or instead of emphasizing this word, try this one instead. So you end up with a lot of different takes that really give it a very different feeling, depending on which one you go for.
Putback is the feature that I'm happiest with in the game, and it actually came about as sort of a little bit of an accident. Playtesters had told us they didn't want to feel like some kind of horrible person rummaging around this house and tossing everything on the floor, but there wasn't really any other option initially. That's all you could do, was sort of try and lob things back into the place. So, I had done some code before for placing turrets and things in other games where it, will arbitrarily orient an object to be perpendicular to surface and all that sort of stuff. I told Steve that, we'd have a lot of edge cases with that and it would take some time to implement, and temporarily I would just give him the ability to put objects that these things would kind of stick to in the game, and we tried that, and it worked so well that we decided to keep that, and that's where Putback came from.
Fanzines, that's one of the things that we started doing right away, was doing these Riot Grrrl fanzines, and everyone would contribute and write an article for it, and then we'd compile it and make these Riot Grrrl fanzines, and we would mail them out to people. All this is so funny to talk about it before the internet, but we used the mail, and people would write. We had a PO box, and we started getting letters because people would read in someone else's fanzine, there's this Riot Girl thing that started happening, right? And it just, I mean, it was the most incredible thing. It just snowballed. Girls wanted to be a part of it immediately across the country, right? So from the time we started Heavens to Betsy in 1991, I think it was only a year later, right? So 1 year of Riot Girl meetings and these letters happening and these fanzines happening. Well, a year later, we left on the Riot Girl tour, the Heavens to Betsy Bratmobile Riot Girl tour, from Olympia to DC. Well, for some reason, it took us like almost 5 weeks to get there on this tour. And we ended up staying in DC another something like 5 weeks before the Riot Girl convention that happened. So that all of this, all of these fanzines, all these girls across the country started getting interested in Riot Girl, and the press just went bananas. I mean, the press attention was off the hook. New York Times, USA Today, all these journalists wanted information and wanted to interview all of us. And it was crazy. So by the time we got to the Riot Girl convention, suddenly we were truly part of a movement.
The music for Gone Home was mainly composed over 2 separate periods, roughly a year apart. A version of Part 1 of the game had to be ready by October 2012 for submission to the 2013 Independent Games Festival, so I did all the Part 1 audio logs primarily that September. The following summer I did another round of logs for the second half of the game, as well as some Part 1 revisions in the ambient exploration tracks. One really nice side effect of the long gap between composition sessions, as well as the structure of writing music that is very literally accompanying a story, was that I ended up hitting on pretty different ideas and approaches over time as I got further along in Sam's story. The original sketches I did had mainly electric piano sounds, which are warmer and more naturalistic than synthesizers and other electronics instruments. As Sam and Lonnie's story developed more, though, I started to bring in acoustic guitar as well. It seemed like an appropriate way for the music to build up some more familiar, natural elements, somewhat echoing Sam coming into her own. Eventually, it became a really tonal element of the score. After that emerged, I started to more carefully control the instrumentation for the various main categories of log subject matter, including Sam's self-reflections, Sam and Lonnie, Sam and her parents, and even Sam and Daniel. Some of those have their own melodies and themes as well. That wasn't really a grand plan from the start, and I don't expect everyone to really notice it, but it became one of my favorite things about working on this score.
So earlier in an earlier version of the story in Gone Home, Sam and Lonnie got caught together, and Lonnie's dad was like an asshole about it and threatened to send Lonnie to live with her mom in Florida. And we cut that. It was too melodramatic and it wasn't really interesting. It was an external force that was acting on them, which I wasn't super excited about in practice, and so on and so forth. But it caused there to be this concept of Lonnie's mom living in Florida, which
Florida is, of course, the worst place that you can live.
Well, let's not assume. But that said, it's the other side of the country, and it's totally so foreign from Oregon and everything. Also, it's where I grew up.
Yeah, that was. Why
So
I was kidding you.
so yes, the reason I think that Lonnie's mom lives in Florida is that I grew up in Florida, and I moved from Florida to Oregon when I was like 19, and I've been back to visit, but if someone were to say to me, "Hey Steve, do you want to go back and live in Florida?" I would take a sheet of notebook paper and I would write "no" on it, as big as you can get, and
with
hand it back to
gravestones.
you. There would be knives, there would be
Yeah.
gravestones, there would be
Dead
lightning,
face. Yeah.
big X's in the
Yeah.
eyes, vampire teeth for some reason.
I was largely unfamiliar with Florida, and my family started going there every once in a while, or when I was like in high school, for Christmas because my mom hates being cold, and
Pick the wrong goddamn place to live,
I
Mrs.
know.
Zamanja.
Yeah, well, you know. But anyway, the only thing that I remember basically is that everybody had lawn flamingos, and we went around Christmas. So I remember hearing on the radio multiple times dogs barking Christmas carols. That's Florida.
Florida sounds cooler than I remember it being.
In my head, that's Florida, right there.
All of the sliding doors that you see in the game are actually, from a code perspective, drawers. When I made a thing that could slide along a track like that, for the purpose of making drawers, Steve took it and, as designers are wont to do, used it for his own purposes and came up with sliding doors in our game.
Writing Sam was a unique challenge, just in the sense of, on the one hand, it was very much from my personal experience because it's about being a teenager and my memories from that time, you know, as an individual, but also who Sam was and what her experience was. Came about as a result of kind of problem solving that we were doing, that Carla and I were doing, just figuring out what the story and what the conflict in the story was going to be. So, you know, by the time we figured out this was all going to take place in one house.
I had an interesting talk with Mom and Dad tonight. One you were never gonna need to have. I mean, you've known, right? I've known. I've known since, like, She-Ra. Mom and Dad didn't, I guess. But they saw the zine and the stuff on the locker, and they were like, is there something we should know about you and Lonnie? And so here's the thing. I was prepared for them to be mad, or disappointed, or start crying, or something. But they were just in denial. You're too young to know what you want. You and Lonnie are just good friends. You just haven't met the right boy. It's a phase. That's what I didn't see coming. That they wouldn't even respect me enough to believe me. Well, joke's on them, 'cause they're in for one very long phase.
You know, it's really about the ideals that we were trying to get across in our music. You know, I think that the move to equality for women and for everyone in the U.S. is something that we all want to be a part of, right? And we used Riot Grrrl and we used music as the tool for that, you know. And that, but it's really, to me, it's about equality for everyone. That I think is the key, and that's why young people really feel passionate, and that they listen to the music and they hear that that passion, and that's what they connect with.
when you put out any sort of content about your game online, whether it's screenshots or whether it's gameplay or anything along those lines, you're sort of at the mercy of the internet, and you sort of want to see what people are going to respond to, whether it's positive or negative. Hopefully it's positive. But we put out the screenshot a while back of the TV room, among other screenshots, and there's lots of wonderful comments, and I was really happy about that. But one of the comments that I saw a couple of times was people talking about how greasy this pizza box was. Something I hadn't noticed, so I went back and I checked it. It's a very greasy pizza box. Maybe Sam's into deep dish pizza, who knows? But I'm glad we didn't change it. I'm glad we kept it just as gross as it always was. I like it.
Definitely the second half was where a lot more of the emotional weight in the character came out, and that was a lot to handle, but a lot of fun to do too, because I've really not gotten to do a character that actually was so, I guess, emotionally real and so human. You know, it's sort of, you're not doing some commercial selling you thing, or not doing some sort of sci-fi fantasy world sort of story. It was very realistic and very relatable, and you sort of realize that the character's someone that you could know or that you could have been, you know, when you were younger, which I really liked. It was very exciting. The whole experience has been really good.
For a long time, the kitchen was not going to be mid-renovation the way that it is. And it's one of those things that I think that necessity, you know, for a long time, the kitchen was not going to be mid-renovation the way that it is. And it's one of those things that I think that necessity, you know, a production constraint actually made this part of the house better than it would have been if we could have just done whatever we wanted. Because for a long time we were like, okay, it's just going to be a kitchen, and so we're going to need a bunch of food, which we ended up making, and we're going to need a bunch of appliances, and we're going to need a bunch of, you know,
Lonnie had her going away show with her band tonight. She's so incredible on stage. When she was singing, I could practically forget everything. That we only had 48 hours left. That I don't know what comes next. That I can't live without her. Then she dedicated the last song to me. And I couldn't take it. I was out on the curb in the alley, sobbing till my ribs hurt. I would follow her anywhere, Katie. But I can't. Where she's going. After a long time, she found me. She said she was sorry. She said, I wish things could be different. I just wanted to make you happy. I said, I don't think you can anymore.
For a long time, the kitchen was not going to be mid-renovation the way that it is. And it's one of those things that I think that necessity, you know, a production constraint actually made this part of the house better than it would have been if we could have just done whatever we wanted. Because for a long time we were like, okay, it's just going to be a kitchen, and so we're going to need a bunch of food, which we ended up making, and we're going to need a bunch of appliances, and we're going to need a bunch of, you know, utensils and a block with kitchen knives in it and all the kind of stuff that would be in a kitchen. And at some point we just realized we didn't have the bandwidth to, like, of all the rooms in a house, the kitchen, I think, has the most just one-off, unique thingies in it, because there's all these kitchen appliances and stuff that appear nowhere else in a house. And so at some point we just realized it wasn't going to make sense for us to try to portray that in a literal way. And so I just had the idea what if I just tore the place apart and, the cabinets were sitting on the ground and the counters were laid up against the wall, and it's an old house, and maybe before the family moved in, the kitchen hadn't been updated since the 50s, and so they decided to redo the kitchen, and they're in the middle of that when you get here. I think that that's hopefully more visually interesting than playing it straight would have been, and B, it allowed us to make this feel like a believable space in a way that we just wouldn't have been able to otherwise.
So that was probably the hardest one we had to record. It was part of the second batch of recording we did, and so I had the script a few days before we did the recording to kind of read through it all and get a feel for where the story was going. And then we'd met for lunch to go over everything and see if I had any questions before we went into the studio. And I just right away admitted, like, yep, some part of this script here, like, I'll be honest, one of these totally had me crying, like, straight up, totally couldn't help it. Figuring, like, yeah, I had my cry out, it was good, I'll be fine, get to the recording, it'll be great, get it out of your system. And as soon as, like, I read the first word, I was like, no, oh God, I'm gonna start crying again, it's gonna be great. I'm like, hey, I'm a professional voice actress in the studio, I'm going to totally bawl all over your lines, and it's going to sound ridiculous and terrible, and we're going to have to do the take again, and it's going to sound even worse, because now I'm crying. So it actually ended up being one take. Really, it's cathartic in a way for me, I think, because it's really, how do I put it? It's really me talking to, like, specific people. I knew it was going to happen again. I knew it. It's the stupid writing being so on point. Which is definite praise for the character build-up at this point, because I just become so connected with her, and making those parallels all the way along. And then you get to this point where it's like, I know exactly how you feel. Like, I know exactly what you're going through. I mean, it was completely authentic. I mean, I've enjoyed people commenting on the connection they've had to the emotion that's in the character. And this is always the diary I think of, because it's the one that it most got me.
I'd already played through the first full half of Gone Home before I started composing any music, which was really important to understand how the game felt and played and looked. But I didn't get a build of the complete game until I'd already been delivered the Part 2 audio logs, and then ended up not playing any of the second half of the game until it was fully complete and I'd written all the music. This wasn't originally my intention, but it meant I ended up fully immersed in Sam's story, essentially to the exclusion of all the other subplots of the game, which are not accompanied by specific music. I don't know if that was objectively the right call or not as the composer, but it definitely made me feel very connected to that character. I probably heard Sarah delivering Sam's story dozens or maybe hundreds of times over. It also meant I didn't actually know the literal implications of the ending of Sam's story, so I was imagining all kinds of potential endings that ended up being a lot darker than what you see when you finally do reach the attic. So as a player, when I did complete the game, I was pretty relieved.
We didn't really give Kate very specific direction for this. She gave us some
Ref pictures.
some reference for us to approve and everything. But when we put it into the game, again, not a request from us at all. Looking at the struts and the shape of the windows and how it's this sort of deco metal structure with water outside of it, I was just like, welcome to Rapture.
Oh, I know, it's so true.
It almost feels
really is
like
true.
an intentional reference, if only it were intentional. So you want to talk about this fucking jazz mug?
Nobody wants to talk about the jazz mug.
Well,
It's
except
the
for
worst.
Carla.
I hate it. It's the worst.
That was such a common theme
Yeah.
when we were like approving assets or making
Yeah.
stuff visually for Gone Home, is just like, oh my god, that's hideous. I fucking hate it. We're putting it in the game.
Yeah,
Because
there's
like
so
just
much
like
of that.
awful 90s furniture and like the
Like we see it in a secondhand store or like
or you
just
see
on
it in the
internet.
Sears catalog
like,
we
yeah,
bought,
also
and it's just
true.
like there's
We
so
just
many
feel like,
fucking
oh,
ruffles on it. I want
oh.
to puke. Like the wicker furniture in
Yeah.
Mom and Dad's room.
Right.
It's like, that's fucking hideous.
We need it.
We agreed our last night together would be our happiest ever, and we'd forget tomorrow was going to come at all. It worked for a while. We had a good time seeing Oscar off, then ran up to the attic to look through our photos, to find one for Lonnie to take with her. And looking at them, I realized they were all in the past, and there wouldn't be any more. And I didn't know what I was going to do. And I cried. And she held me. She said she knew it was hard, but life would move on. I said I didn't want my life to keep moving without her. That's when she cried too. I was so exhausted. I must have fallen asleep like that, in her arms. In the morning, I woke up, and I was finally alone.